Hi, it's Nikki here from Happy Hormones for Life. And today we're focusing on something a bit different, men's health. And I've got Ross Tomkins with me, who's a men's health advocate and founder of Alphagenix. And he was actually introduced to me by my dad. So I want to kick off, Ross. Thank you so much for being with me today. And tell us a little bit, how do you know my dad, first of all?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Nikki. I'm really looking forward to sharing a bit about my story. And my story starts, well, pretty much the beginning is with your dad. I guess the year or two before that, I was early 30s, tired, achy, a little bit overweight, and having brain fog. I reluctantly went to my GP, as many men do. It was my wife that made me go. I had some blood tests done, and the doctor said, "Oh, these must have been contaminated. They can't be right. Your TSH is plus 99. It's gone off the scale. We'll run them again." I had it redone, and he said, "Oh, actually, that's correct." So they sent me into the endocrinology system within the NHS.
So TSH, by the way, is thyroid, isn't it? So we're looking at
Thyroid, sorry, yeah, so thyroid stimulating hormone, for anyone who hasn't come across it. What I've since discovered are the two hormones that will make the biggest difference in a man's life are your thyroid and testosterone. If you optimize those, like, wow, what a difference you can make. But I went into the NHS, saw an endocrinologist. They put me on a medication, synthetic thyroid medication, levothyroxine. I felt awful. I went back to him and said, "This can't be right." He said, "No, I've run your bloods. You're fine now." I said, "But I don't feel fine. Like, I don't care what your blood work says. I feel ghastly." So I don't want a second opinion. So I went to see a second endocrinologist. He said, "Very similar." I said, "I want a third opinion." And I'm a physiotherapist, by the way, for anybody listening. So I had some medical knowledge. I knew my aches and pains weren't musculoskeletal. And I was fairly sure there was something going on inside. I saw the third endocrinologist and he said, "Look, Ross, there is nothing wrong with you. It is all in your head."
wow.
At that point, by that point now, my brain fog was like thinking through concrete. And I was driving home from work one day just after this had happened, and I gave myself a little mental challenge to name as many things in the car that I could. And I failed at the very first hurdle because I couldn't even tell you what the steering wheel was called. I was looking at it, and I've driven my whole life, and I just couldn't tell you what this thing was called, what it was called, and not holding it in my hand. And it was really scary. And I got in from work, and I said to my wife, I said, "I don't care what the doctors have said. I know my body better than they do. I've lived with it my whole life. They've known me for 30 minutes. Something is wrong." And at this time, I'd never been into sort of the private world for healthcare before. And Joanne just said, "It doesn't matter what's wrong with you. It doesn't matter where we need to go. We've got to find the answer." So I jumped onto Google, as you do, and put in my vague feelings of being unwell, achy, tired, all sorts came up. Chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, thyroid problems. I knew I had a thyroid issue. And your dad popped up as a possible solution. I was like, "Joanne, there's this guy, there's this doctor down in Wimpole Street, just off Harley Street down in London. He seems to know what he's talking about. He's helped other people with vague symptoms like me." So I booked an appointment with Pat, with your mum, and I went down to see Bernie. And I walked in and he said, "How can I help you, Ross?" I said, "It's a really long story, Dr. Willis." And he said, "You paid for an hour. You can talk for an hour if you want." I said, "Okay." So I spoke for 58 minutes about everything that was going on. I can explain exactly what's going on to you, Dr. Willis, but no one understands." And he said, "Try me." I said, "I feel," and I've given this analogy to all the doctors I've ever seen. I said, "I feel like an antique toy robot. I want someone to put the key back in and wind me back up because I feel like I've run out of wind. Like, I can push on." At this point, I'd just got back from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and I told the doctors I can ignore these feelings. Like, my willpower is stronger than the physical symptoms. I can push on. I can go to work. I can be a dad. I can climb mountains, but it's hard. And they just said, well, there can't be anything serious wrong with you because you couldn't do that. Anyway, I explained all this. It's maybe a bit longer than you thought my answer might be, but I explained all this, and at the end, he just went, "It's obvious what's wrong with you." It's like, it's obvious what's wrong. I said, I've seen 2 GPs and 3 endocrinologists. I said, well, the NHS don't believe in this. He said, but your testosterone is low, and they've given you the wrong thyroid medication. You can't synthesize what they've given you. And I was a little skeptical the first time in the private sector. I'm thinking he just wants to sell me something. That's what the private medical sector is all about. I said, well, can you prove this theory of yours? He said, yeah, we'll run your bloods. And if your testosterone comes back here, I was wrong. If it comes back in this range, and we can probably do this naturally, but if it comes back here, you need HRT. I was like, HRT? Like what ladies get? Completely uneducated about this at the time. And he said, yeah, men can use HRT2, testosterone replacement therapy. I said, okay, let's run this test of yours. And he was absolutely bang on. And that was a decade ago. My life has completely turned around thanks to your dad. I'm stronger, fitter, healthier, and continue to improve every day of my life. And I'm 46 now. I'm better than I was at 26. Thanks to Bernie, thanks to Dr. Willis.
And now you are helping other men, aren't you, to understand their testosterone and get that replaced.
Yeah.
What can you just tell us, give us a bit of a little overview of what happens with men and why does their testosterone go down, but what is it a more of a general pattern of hormone changes as you go through your 30s, 40s and 50s?
Yeah, the big difference between male and female hormonal changes, ladies' hormones change quite quickly, so it's quite obvious when these things happen. But in a man, it's really slow. So you tend to lose 1 to 3% of your testosterone production per year from the age of 30. But there are a variety of other environmental factors that might accelerate that or mean it's happening at an even younger age. In fact, one study came out recently that showed 20% of 15 to 39-year-old men are low in testosterone. But typically it is from 30. Let's say 1 to 3% production per year is reduced. Now, because that's such a slow decline, men slowly acclimatize. So by the time they're sitting on the edge of their bed with really low hormones, just thinking, is this it? Like, is this what the rest of my life's going to be like? I'm tired, I'm achy, I'm irritable. They go and see the doctor. The doctor says, oh, you're middle age. You're just getting old. That's why you put a bit of weight on and why you feel this way. And it's not the case. It is just like with ladies as well. And you can improve those hormones by giving the right medication and changing the lifestyle.
So what does testosterone do for a man? I know what it does for women because we need it as well, but what does it do for men and what are the signs of deficiency? I know you've mentioned a few of them, but can you just give us a kind of potted?
Yeah, so the number of symptoms are vast, but I would say the common 10 are low mood, low energy, low libido, brain fog, feelings of anxiety and depression, loss of muscle mass, weight gain, particularly around the middle, and slower recovery after exercise with those aches and pains. So they're the ones we see every day. And more often than not, when a gentleman's experiencing this, it's really hard to put your finger on what it is. I remember saying it to Birdie all those years ago, and we hear it every week from men we speak to. They say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't put my finger on it, but something's not right. It's this vague feeling that you are just not living up to who you're supposed to be, I guess. So they're the main symptoms that you will come across.
Right. And tell me a little bit about the thyroid, because that was happening alongside that. From what I know, those symptoms are very similar, aren't they?
They are, yeah, and of course, both hormones cascade down from the pituitary gland. They're really, really closely interlinked. It's really important that you differentiate to check whether you have one or both of those things going on within the body. You shouldn't just, buy medication on the black market, as some people do, whether it's the thyroid medication or testosterone, but have the proper blood testing, speak to someone who knows what they're talking about, and make that diagnosis. But yeah, they are very, very similar.
And it's quite they're two of the tests that are not necessarily very well done on the NHS, are they? Because of I don't know, what is that about, and why is it so? Why are those two things, the thyroid and the testosterone, so neglected, do you think, in the medical world?
It's tricky question. I think there's a lot of antiquated knowledge, particularly around andrology and men's health, and that it extends into how the thyroid, acts as a starter motor and helps every system within the body, whether you're male or female. So I think there's a lot of antiquated knowledge. There's because of the state of health in general, we are becoming less healthy as a species. We're becoming more overweight, and every year that means that the general population's numbers get worse. So every few years, the powers that be decide to move the bell curve down a little bit. So what happens to be normal and therefore acceptable has got less and less and less over the years. So I'd like to think that doctors in the NHS are just blissfully unaware, and they're not being ignorant to these things, or knowingly not helping someone. I think they're doing the best they can with the knowledge they've got. But if it carries on like this, that bell curve, that normal range is going to get lower and lower and lower every few years until who knows what we've got in the future. It's quite scary. I'm not sure if I answered your question there. I might have gone off on
Yeah,
a
no,
tangent a little bit.
you absolutely have. I think testosterone particularly has got a bit of a bad rap, hasn't it? What's the history around that, do you think?
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject because testosterone was first synthesized, almost 90 years ago. Cypionate, which is still considered to be the gold standard by most doctors in this space. The guys that synthesized it won the Nobel Prize for their actual contributions to sexual medicine. It's incredible. It's been researched for 90 years. There is no downside to this except it possibly can affect fertility, which to a man who's already in advancing years, that usually isn't an issue. And there's literally no other downside. So it's one of the safest things you could possibly introduce to the body, at medically controlled normal levels is the caveat to that, and brings me on to your question, which is I think it has a negative connotation because it has been abused by the sort of the bodybuilding world for many years. So at higher levels, it may affect mood negatively. And you still have this myth that TRT is going to make someone aggressive. And of course it doesn't. It's the opposite. What's likely to make a man feel irritable, moody, and aggressive? Is it having low testosterone, no confidence, no low libido, low energy, or is it feeling full of confidence, with a strong, healthy body and a sound mind? Which one's going to have a negative effect? It's clearly the first one, and yet we still have this myth that TRT causes aggression and it causes problems like that. And it's sadly, I think, due to this abusive, the fact it has been abused in the past in certain situations, I think.
Yeah, and it's maybe that's why there's some reluctance around it to make it a kind of standard treatment, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we have patients that come and we speak to them, and they say, "Oh, I'm really keen, but my wife doesn't want me to do it because she doesn't want me to get aggressive." We say, "Well, were you aggressive, or are you aggressive anyway?" No. Well, why would you think you're going to be now? Were you aggressive when you were 18? No, I wasn't. Well, we're just going to put back in what testosterone is supposed to be there. So if you weren't aggressive when you were 18, why would you possibly think you're going to be now? No, okay, that makes sense.
So men's kind of these midlife changes hormonally in men are referred to as andropause. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah,
You've
we
written a
don't.
book on this, Ross, haven't you?
I have
Can you
read the book on it. Yeah.
give us
Um,
I know we've talked about testosterone, but what else is going on for men in this andropause period that people need to know about, particularly men and their loved ones?
I think the key thing, because testosterone is so key in a man, we're far more simple creatures than you guys, with your plethora of hormones. Testosterone is the king steroid. It is a steroid. Steroids aren't bad, as you know. Steroid just means derived from cholesterol, and vitamin D is a steroid as well. And testosterone in a man is the king steroid. It controls pretty much everything else that's going on in your body. from how strong your bones are to how well you build muscle, but also through to your cognitive function and your mood. So when we talk about andropause, often people just think of sexual function. So they'll just think, right, erectile problems and libido. That's all testosterone does. It's just there to make a man function sexually. But that's such a tiny actual component to what it does. So, and that's the big thing with the andropause. You know, your erections might be absolutely fine. Your libido might be brilliant, but you could be experiencing debilitating anxiety and depression. You might just feel off and you're not sure why. You might pile weight on, which affects your self-confidence. There's all sorts of these other things that come into the andropause, which you might think have nothing to do with testosterone when you're just thinking of this as a sexual hormone. And that's probably the message we try and convey the most, which is this isn't just a sex hormone. This improves every part of your life.
And the same for women, to be fair. Yes, it helps with libido, but it's vital for your brain and your bones and your muscle stability, etc.
Yeah. But the main, I mean, as you know, the symptoms are pretty much the same, with the difference that it can affect a man's erection as well, which then can have so many problems within that man's life, from their marriage and their relationships to their confidence in being a man. Like, it's incredible how that affects gentlemen. We see that sort of on a really regular basis. And how it often plays out is that a gentleman will start experiencing erectile dysfunction. His wife or partner will say, fancy being amorous this evening, or something like that. And they say, oh, I've had a stressful day at work, got a bit of a headache, maybe tomorrow. And this goes on for a little while. The wife or the partner, puts two and two together and gets 57 and says they clearly don't fancy him anymore and they're having an affair.
Yeah.
That drives a bit of a wedge between them. The man who just is so scared to say anything, and if he is going to say something, he's often going to get it wrong. Things like, it's not you, it's me. What, you don't fancy me anymore? And these things then blow up and become a big problem. And we have seen, marriages fall apart just because they didn't have an open conversation at the start. So again, I've maybe gone off on a bit of a tangent, but the big difference between men and women is the fact it can affect the erectile strength as well. But that's not just a sexual thing. That affects a man on so many levels, psyche, right through to marriage and everything in between.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's a similar, maybe not as strong on the women's side, but very much, losing sexual function can massively affect relationships and self-esteem and everything around that.
We as men, we're used to waking up with this thing every morning, or most mornings, for a long time. It kind of becomes part of, I guess, who you are, and then all of a sudden it's not there anymore. That is a huge thing for a man to contend with.
And with that, with everything that's going on, I mean, I'm understanding now why men have a kind of midlife crisis. This is a lot to do with what's going on and their feelings around it. Have you seen that correlation quite a bit?
Do you mean sort of in how they sort of emotionally deal with all of this?
I think men, when they, we all know that a lot of men, when they get to middle age, kind of lose or their sense of identity. They don't. Yeah, they start to kind of seek their younger selves, or look for different I guess stimulations, I suppose. And yeah, and it happens a lot that relationships break down, or they go and find another partner, or give up, or go and buy a motorbike or a sports car or whatever. Is that I'm getting the feeling that maybe it's trying to restore their virility in some way.
Yeah, I think so. It's probably, I can't sit here and say, everything is testosterone. That's the most important thing in the world. Obviously, we're more complex creatures than that, but I do think there's a big part of what you've just said there is true. When you start to feel, I guess, less of a man because of what's going on inside, and if you don't know that, you can't change it. So what can you do? You can't change the inside. You're going to change things on the outside. So that could be the relationship that you're in, the younger partner, the car, the sports car or the bike, and all those things as well, because you don't even know it's something inside, because most doctors tell you you're getting old and there's nothing wrong with you. And most of us, of course, aren't aware of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So when should men get or look for support? And do you think there's enough support out there at the moment? And I'm going to kind of guess the answer to this.
Yeah, there's woefully inadequate support out there. And unfortunately, as we were talking just off air before, a lot of the doctors out there just don't know about this, and they give awful advice out. TRT causes prostate cancer. TRT can cause heart attacks. It makes you aggressive. All of these things are myths that have been disproven several times over, and yet that is still spouted by endocrinologists and GPs, throughout the UK. So there's definitely not enough support out there. Um, um, so we don't typically ask for help, but what you can do is you can kind of reframe it as, rather than asking for help, you can monitor yourself on a regular basis to check for things that might be going wrong. So I'm a big advocate of having your bloods done on a fairly frequent basis, even if you're feeling great, because they're a good indication of what's going on inside. So if you start having those done in your late 20s, early 30s, you're going to be the first person to know if your thyroid is starting to decline, or if your testosterone is starting to go down, or if your vitamin D is declining, or you're becoming anemic, and then you can do something about it. So I think we are historically not very good at asking for help. Is that going to change anytime soon? No. Would you want it to? Well, that's a different question for another time. My feeling on that, I think, from what we just said there, but you can reframe it as, get tested to check before something's going to go wrong. If that makes sense.
I do think men are a bit more likely to get a test done than maybe necessarily go and chat about how they're feeling. So I
Yeah.
think there's a sort of, men like logical results, a lot of them. So I know that's the case with my husband. I get him tested every single year, and he likes to see, that, things are okay. And if things aren't, then he's got some evidence on a bit of paper for taking a supplement or doing whatever I tell him to do. So I think there's an element of that. So as women in men's lives, whether it's partners, spouses, or sons or brothers or whatever, I think we can really help to get support to them in a way that kind of suits them, in if you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Oh, definitely. It's that reframing of it, from asking for help if you're feeling not right, to let's get ahead of anything and make sure you stay the optimal version of yourself. If you say that to a man, because as you say, we do like those logical facts. Would you, if there was a way for you to stay on top of your game forever, would you do it? Definitely. That's a different question to, how are you feeling today, and are your erections as strong as they used to be?
Yeah,
I don't want to talk about that.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a really good point.
I love that reframe. Actually, it's a really great question, and it really like speaks to them, not, especially the non-communicators amongst the men, because men are very different, and some of them love to communicate and some don't. So that would be a great question for those that don't.
Yeah.
I want to just finish off with, what are some things that men can do around, just if they're not going to go down that route, what are the other things that they can do naturally to stay healthy and stay on top of their health as they're going through mid-age, midlife?
Great question again. Yeah, and it is important to convey that there are lots of things that you can do. I'm certainly not sitting here and saying everyone needs to go on TRT. There's an awful amount that you can do from a natural perspective as well. So one, you have to be optimizing your sleep patterns. If you're going to bed crazy late, getting up at all sorts of weird times, then of course your hormones are going to be affected. So get into a really nice routine, go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time. That makes a big difference. What type of exercise are you doing, and what sort of regularity? If you're just sitting on the sofa all day and not doing any exercise, your hormones are going to be affected. So you need to be out, and exercising to fatigue is important with testosterone. So that's lifting until you can't do one more rep, or doing squats until you can't do one more. Going to the point of fatigue will help boost your testosterone levels. So sleep's got to be right. You've got to be doing exercise. Nutrition, of course, the fuel you're putting into your body has a huge impact on what's going to happen inside. So, not eating ultra processed foods, trying to stick to organic whole food as much as possible. If it's got a label on it, probably don't eat it. these type of things can make a big difference. Then you've got supplements, zinc, magnesium, tonka ali, ashwagandha. They've got omega-3. These have all got good evidence around them and saying you can probably get a 15, 20, maybe 25% increase in your testosterone. So if it's a little bit low, that's enough to get it up. If you're then sleeping right, exercising regularly, eating good food, maybe you don't need HRT. And the last thing is doing something, of course, to protect your mental health as well. Life is increasingly more stressful and fast-paced. And again, men aren't as good at it, but taking time out to have that quiet time, whether it's meditation, mindfulness, journaling, with a gratitude diary, or something as simple as going for a walk in nature with your dog. These things as well can have a real positive effect. And in the past, that was always a difficult conversation to have with a man. Try meditating to increase your testosterone. Well, that didn't seem to make sense in a lot of men's heads. But there is a study now that came out, I think, last year that showed improving your spiritual health increases or improves mental health, and improved mental health has a direct correlation to improved physical outcomes. So now believing in a higher power has been shown to increase your physical health and improve testosterone. So again, we've got this logical reason now why a man should be, journaling or doing mindfulness.
Oh, there's so much research around cortisol and stress and how that impacts your steroid sex hormones anyway. So, I think that there's a ton of evidence that shows that stress management and reduction, in whatever form you want to do it in, works. And it's just getting that message through to guys as well, isn't it? Thank you so much, Ross. It's been a total pleasure talking to you, and I'm really glad we've increased awareness of the men's side of things, because we talk a lot about the women's health side of things, and I think this is going to be the next big thing that comes up that we really need to focus on. So thank you for your time, really appreciate it, and I'll put all the links down to where people can find out about Alphagenix for more support from you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Nikki. I really enjoyed it. Went off on a few tangents, but hopefully it was helpful for everyone listening.
It's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.